Welcome, everyone, to another episode of FitFam. As always, this is Miss Natural Olympia, Hilary.
And this guy right here is Doug the Formulator.
And today we're going to be talking about hometown hero Justin Gaethje, one of the greatest upsets events of all time, but not necessarily just about him, about a principle that's really important, I think, in life about how you look at things.
I like it. Welcome to FitFam.
Welcome to FitFam. So let's
I think I should preface this with you and I are not sports. What is that word?
Aficionados? That we are.
We do not analyze sports.
Oh, we're not sports analysts.
Yeah, that's not our gig. But this isn't so much about that as it is about success.
About success. Yeah, it's a good point. And so we have to give a little bit of a framework here to get to the point of FitFam today. And hang with us, even if you're not into sports or UFC, because it's not, like you said, it's not about that. And it's not about analyzing the fight. But what happened was in the UFC, that's the Ultimate Fighting Championship, right? Where it's any type of combat sport you put in the ring and see who's the best. And over time, they've learned that it's a combination of you have to be great at boxing and at jiu-jitsu and at wrestling, and like the person that's most well-rounded usually is better than others, right?
Sure.
Something like that. They do it in an octagon. And this last weekend, they had an event, first time ever, at the White House, and in celebration.
Yeah, celebration of the 250th for the U.S.
For the U.S. And happy birthday, USA. And so it was really cool. But on the headliner was a guy that is from the Valley here, Justin Gaethje, who's a little bit older for a pro athlete, 37, which is pretty old for that sport, right? That's usually about the time they're retiring. And he was at least a 6-1 underdog against a guy that was undefeated.
We love a good underdog.
Yeah, we do.
Don't we?
Yeah. And his name Ilia Topuria. And Ilia was a two-time champion. He was a world champion at the moment, undefeated, and he actually had knocked out 3 people that knocked out Justin Gaethje.
Wow!
So the odds were like ridiculous, right? And fast forward, Gaethje won impressively. He won 3 out of 5 rounds. The other guy did not look good, and Justin didn't look like he'd even been in a fight. And
but he was hurt throughout the fight.
Oh, he was hurt.
Like it's not like he got in there and just demolished this guy. This was a fight.
Yeah.
They both did some damage.
Normal people might have went down, and Justin got hit in the liver.
Yeah.
Every time we've ever seen that hit before, it's over, and he did go down, but he was able to stay in it. So you're right. It was a fight.
It was a fight.
And you saw a lot of grit.
Yeah.
For him to win. And I think that the other guy even said later, like, I hit him like I've hit others, and he didn't like end the fight, like he kept going.
Yeah.
So, but what's interesting that the FitFam's about today is after the fight, automatically this guy that very few people knew unless you're into UFC, overnight, most of you probably at least have heard of what happened, is like this overnight, like now, a lot of people in the world know about him because.
Well, I think people knew about him before that. I think he was pretty well known, but I think people weren't giving it the credit that he maybe absolutely deserved.
Exactly, and now he's an all-star.
And
so, the thing though is that people started posting, and we saw a lot of things, and I saw in the comments, and they actually talked about it on ESPN of the reasons that he won.
Right.
And, they gave some of the reasons that they were saying that they thought.
Yeah. So, I think some of the things people were saying was he was raised by a hardworking dad, grew up in kind of a rougher mining town. His mom was also a hard worker and a nurse, and they were good at
the postmaster for like 30 years.
Yeah. Right? And, he just had a different upbringing.
Right. And he learned discipline, and
his mom was a postmaster.
Yeah. His sister, I think, is a nurse.
Yeah.
And it was because he was in a small town that there's nothing else to do. So of course he wrestled, and he didn't have distractions like if you were in the big city, and all of these things. And we just started laughing because it's actually the reason that a lot of people say that you're not successful because you come from a small town and you don't have access to the best coaches because you're not right in the city. The environment, you don't have enough competition because you're in a small town. So the same excuses as to why a person doesn't have success, they now were using as to why he did have success. And
Well,
that's kind of the point.
it's asking two different questions. It's like instead of asking the question, you know, what can I learn from this and him and his upbringing that could help me? It's like, why is he different than me? This is why he's different than me. This is why he's able to do it and I'm not able to do it. Right.
And let's kind of verge away. Was it verge? Let's move away from that for a second. Veer away. That's what I
There
was
you
looking for.
go.
Veer away from that for a second to understand what we're trying to bring home here with FitFam today, and that is, let's look at every aspect of life. If someone is successful, you can pick the reasons, and usually, naturally, as a human being, you pick the reasons that make it easier for you not being successful. Well, they had this, they had this, they had this, but you could do the same thing, if the tides were turned and all of a sudden now this person wasn't successful. You could say, well, it's because of this. It's the same things. Point being is that naturally as human beings, is that we will tend to come up with the reasons why someone does something or achieves something, and it be things that we don't have or an upbringing we didn't have as an excuse for us not achieving great things. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so like one person who grows up in a small town might say, "There's nothing here. There's no way I can succeed." Another person that grows up in a small town can be like, "Ooh, I have less distractions, and I'm going to build something great." So same story,
Same
different
town.
interpretation,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Same thing. A child that grows up with an alcoholic father and says, "Oh, my upbringing was so hard. I had this alcoholic father, so I'm also an alcoholic."
Mm.
And then his brother, you know, grows up and says, "Oh, I had an alcoholic father. I will never drink because I know exactly what that means." It is the exact same story, but you've interpreted it differently.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the point of today, is that the meaning that we give to our stories, the interpretation that we take from them, will determine our success or our excuses. Everybody has a story for success. Everybody has a story for excuse, and
Which story do you pick?
yeah, you get to pick the story, right? It's like when I always tell you, you know, you're too optimistic. You're always, that's not real enough, and you're like, why can't it be real? Why is your version
More real.
why is your version, because it's more negative, more real? You know, my just because it's easier for you to believe in, well, my positive is easier for me to believe in. And so we just have to create the ability to make our stories the success that they're meant to be. We're meant
That's
to proceed and to progress.
that's it. And I think that the more we can do that and have that be the habit, that anything that happens is for our good or will make it for our good,
Right.
right? And one of the analogies that came up that hit home that I've never really thought about was, you know, being in business as long as we've been in business, and even from my side, being a little bit older, right, is that I've had to fire a lot of people, right? Like hundreds of people over the decades.
Right.
And it's amazing to see years later, some people are still bitter and they never really, most of them that I know that are bitter never really achieved any success somewhere else.
Right.
Honestly, they still have that. Everything's a victim. And others that have come back and said, that was absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me. There was one trainer that I remember letting go because he didn't follow the system. And later on came back and said, you know what? Learning that was the best thing that happened to me, because he got into another job that was a management position at a big box chain of called the Q, that was a big fitness center place. Um, and he says, I took from that and learned that I did need to follow the systems. And it was the greatest thing in the world for you to fire me because of that. And and so all of a sudden he took one thing that could have been a negative and it was like, oh, I can learn from that. I can be better. This is what happened and I'll own that versus others. And I thought,
Well,
that's so crazy.
it is crazy. And I think what motivates each of us is very different. Like our stories aren't the same for motivating us to be successes.
Mm,
We need to create the motivation to become a success. But something that I thought was really interesting that Gaethje said after the fight was he kept telling himself, "You're going to be so embarrassed. You're going to be so embarrassed because he's going to get in there and he's going to whoop you or whatever." But he was telling himself this story because he knew it was going to take him to a very primal place that was going to make him work like he's never worked before, right? And so he created this story to make sure he was motivated and determined and did the work that was necessary to get the outcome that he
yeah,
wanted. So we all can be motivated by different things as long as what we're trying to create is a success of our life.
that's it. And I think that's a huge, huge point that you just made because everyone is different in how they do it, just like we're talking about our differences with it. And, for some people, and I heard, and I think it was one of the announcers, Brisbane, I think it was talking even about that point. And he says, if I would have looked at that as saying, oh, you're going to get smashed, you're going to get pummeled, you're going to get this, because I would have cowered.
Right.
Right. But for Gaethje, he knew that was a story he needed to tell himself because he would go to deep places for that not to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to train harder. I'm going to be more focused because he's going to knock me out. It's going to be embarrassing. And so the story that you use needs to be really specific to your success. And for those of you that understand this principle, you're like, okay, I got it. I know this principle. What is the FitFam, podcast doing for us today? What we'd like to do for those of you that even understand this principle is to think, wait a second, for me and my personality, what does the story need to look like?
Yeah.
Right? What does it need to look like? Because there were some athletes, I remember when Michael Jordan, it became known that he'd always make up stories, or if he didn't, his teammates would make up stories before games. You know what he said about your mama and things like that? I remember Danny Ainge being very upset because they said Michael was mad at him, but it was a story that was made up before the game, so Michael would play good. And that worked for him. But when all the other athletes, say, oh, to be like Michael, we have to make up this story that there's an enemy in that. It didn't work for all of them
Yeah.
because for some, it's not good to have an enemy and that you cower versus you take them on, right? I like doing it personally because then I want to take it on. But for others, it's not motivating. For others, the reason needs to be something different.
Right.
And I
Right.
think you need to find out what it is for you that motivates you to overcome anything that comes your way.
And
What is the story?
yeah, and I think the best way to do that is to look at your life in the places that you've had the most success
Mm,
and what was going on in that time frame? What were you telling yourself during that time frame
mhm.
that helped you to become the success that you were? And typically, we grow and we change, but if we can mimic that, it can do the same thing. But sorry, did you want to say something?
It just remind me back last weekend at the funeral of a good friend of mine growing up that had some mentally challenged, right? And back in the day, they even the organization was called the Organization for Retarded Children, which you wouldn't say today, but he had some disabilities, and they talked about talking in front of the mirror every day. And what was it he said? He
Oh
said,
yeah. Just I love you, Lincoln.
I love you, Lincoln. His name was Lincoln. And tell himself, I love you, Lincoln, in the mirror. And I'm like, I never say I love you, Doug, in the mirror. But he had to find what he needed to say to get through each day and to like feel successful and all that. And that kind of goes back to what
Yeah.
individually, like you're saying, we need to find what it is for us that motivates us and do that research. Find out when you've had the most success, when you overcame things. What did you say? And that's what you need to develop is that habit over and over again.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention, you can find successful people that grew up rich, grew up poor, were big cities, small town, had good parents, had bad parents, were educated, uneducated, like just every type of situation,
Mhm.
people have made a success of their life. And it just kind of what determines that is the interpretation that they've given for the things that they've been through. And everything that we go through is for our benefit, for our growth.
For our
And if
growth.
we can look at it that way, it changes everything.
And I love the statement that the event isn't determining your future. Whatever event happens doesn't determine your future at all. The interpretation of the event determines your future.
Yeah.
And once you understand that the interpretations of life is the key, not life events itself, it's your interpretation. And the more you can focus on the interpretation, that's really the biggest factor. We've seen people that wanted to improve their health that had major disabilities, right? We've had people that want to improve their health that had major conditions that, we're going to kill them or maybe even affect them. Even if they did get better, the rest of life is going to be different, and choose to be as healthy as possible. And others say, well, it's already too late anyways, right?
Right.
And we have family members that you could tell was more of that. It was like, it's crazy. It was never the event. It was always the interpretation of the event.
Yeah. So we can decide to learn, to persist, to grow, to keep moving forward. Really, it is all a decision, and happiness is the same, right? It's a
Mm,
decision to be happy, and a decision to have the best possible um, outlook.
yeah. Outlook and outcome, right? I like that too because, again, you can see people in every walk of life choose to be happy in every situation. I've been in some crazy places and situations where I thought there's no one on the planet that could be where I'm at right now and be happy, and seeing people extremely happy, like just choice, like, wow, I woke up today. I'm breathing today. What a glorious, blessed day. Let's rock. I'm like, okay, I can be better. And so I love that happiness is a choice. It's an interpretation of what's going on around you versus how can I be happy? This is going on in my life. You can find a way to do it.
Yeah. And what can I learn?
Yeah,
What can I learn? And if we keep going through things, what is it that I haven't learned yet that man upstairs is helping me
that's a really good
try to
point.
learn? So
And so back to Justin Gaethje. Um, he had made decisions and worked on things that happened in his life and going through, a lot of dark places to turn events, interpret them differently. I mean, the guy got knocked out the most brutal. He probably has the best win in UFC history and the most brutal knockout where he got knocked out in UFC history, like for reals. And he had to take that event that most people would retire from. He was 36 at the time when he got knocked out, and he had to take that and turn it into a positive when everybody, like truly everybody, who said maybe just his blood family was like, yeah, it's probably time to hang it up, right? And turn it into a positive. And so it wasn't Justin Gaethje winning UFC 250. All of a sudden he did these things. It was the years and years and years, all the way back to high school, of him looking at the events in his life and his parents and his family as a positive of something that can make you more successful. And it led up to this huge event. And one last comment about that was one of the first things he said is, I kept praying for the ability someday to do something legendary. And if I would have just won the belt the 2 times he tried before and he lost, it would have been cool, but
yeah,
it wouldn't have been legendary. And he got the opportunity to do something legendary. Right.
that's really cool. So you added a few quotes in here, and I thought these were really cute. So it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Um, you wanna you want me to just go through them?
I like that one. I think what's kind of we said. Go through another one.
Yeah. So between stimulus and
Mm.
response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose.
So I want to comment on that because that was by a guy named Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl had a lot of the same experience being in a prison camp in World War II like my dad did. And it's just Viktor Frankl, he was also a writer. And so he wrote one of these great books about that. And what Viktor Frankl was saying there, I always think back to his experience in the prison camp that we know a lot about reading about and hear it from my dad and stuff growing up. And between stimulus and response, there's a space, and it's that space to where you choose, the power or to actually cower, right? And I think the key, at least for me, that I've seen personally, I felt personally and done personally and seen in others, it's the speed in which you go the direction of the right choice. Not that at first it can be negative, right? It's like, I feel bad or I'm this, I'm that. And, it's how fast you transition it. And the faster you transition it, the happier life is, the more success you have. And so the key through life isn't, being down on yourself and having these things. It's how fast you transition and you work on the transition. Was it go from days to a day to hours to minutes to seconds? When you can get to seconds, and so you like take that breath, yeah, that sucked, was me, but I'm going to turn it into a positive. That's where the magic is. That's where the absolute magic is. And the best of the best, you see them do that. And like even the Justin Gaethje fight, he got hit in the liver, he went down. He knows that that's usually the end. And I'm sure he thought that, okay, I'm done and it's no big deal. I fought a good fight. But he's able to immediately say, how can this be a positive? We'll grab his leg, do this. It's like, it was so cool. And I think that we see that with so many people that do make good decisions. Eventually, they turn it to a positive, but there's that space and time, and there can be some negative created in that if they don't make that decision sooner.
For sure. The same boiling water that softens a potato hardens an egg.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
It's a really good one.
Yeah, it's the same thing we've been saying, right? Like that's the best metaphor of all.
Yeah.
Same town, one success, no success, alcoholic father, right?
Yeah.
Same. Love that.
And then circumstances don't reveal the man; they provide the opportunity for him to reveal himself.
I think that's true, and that revealing itself can change. Like, oh, that event revealed who that person really was. True, but it doesn't mean it has to do it next time. That isn't who that person is, who it was, who they were in the moment. And I think for me, going through so many changes in life where I was an absolute idiot or I made mistakes, and there's still people that will judge based on that, say that's who that person is, versus yeah, way stupid, way this, made these mistakes, even made choices after, took a long time to come to the right realization and make those changes. And now the habits have been developed to make better decisions, so things don't even happen. And but it's sad that some people still live from, I remember this, and so you must be this way.
Yeah, I think the same grace that we want to offer ourselves, because none of us are perfect, right? We need to offer to other people. Or if you're one of those people that has a hard time offering grace to yourself, but you offer it to other people, offer it to yourself. So none of us are perfect. We all are given that space and time where we might make the wrong choice, but we're given another opportunity later to make the right one. And so, we're all doing our best. Most of us, anyways.
Well, I learned a lot just now too, because I have never thought of that, because my mind doesn't work that way, is about giving yourself grace type situation. Like, yeah, you're supposed to forgive others or realize they can change. And in the moment, how are you being treated? How is that? Because they could have grown from that. Maybe they're even stronger than that thing that
Yeah.
that made it so you didn't like them, right? They know that's probably their strength. They're better than other people. But yourself, that's true. Like many times you have to give yourself grace and realize that you can overcome, right? And that might be where your religion comes in, or your belief in God and all that. But whatever it is for you, you need to get there, because that's huge.
Absolutely. For sure.
Well, we know it's very, very different today, but it is a part of health. It is a part of reaching optimal health, is how fast you can turn what might be a negative into a positive, and realize that you can look at life as everything works for you, not against you. And that you can at least turn it into that.
And you can start small. You can start small when small things happen and flip the script. And then you just get better and better at it, so that when big things happen that you could interpret either way, you learn how to interpret it really good. So
let us know what your thoughts are on this. If there's times in your life that you've done this and maybe haven't done it, and just what it does for you. I don't think people realize so as much that the comments from others actually inspire more than the speaker itself. So
for sure.
We hear that a lot, that people will come to our seminars or different things, and then it's the testimonials and people's personal experiences from what they heard in that talk or different things that actually inspires others the most. We'd love to hear from you. As always, this is Miss Natural Olympia Hilary.
And this guy right here is Doug the Formulator.
Keep chewing.
Bye-bye.